So we have about, 20 to 25 games left in the NBA season. I would say the three teams in the East that are all fighting for the number 2 spot behind the Cavaliers would be the Boston Celtics, the Toronto Raptors, and the Washington Wizards. Now, the Celtics hold the number 2 seed right now, but just because they have the number 2 spot, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the second best team in the conference, and it doesn't also mean that they would beat the Raptors or the Wizards in a 7-game series. So I want to talk about these three teams and what I like about them, what I don't like about them, how they match up with each other, and maybe we'll all learn something in the end, maybe not. Now, it should also be said before I really dive in here, the 4th seed is the plague of the Eastern Conference, because that means you have the Cavaliers in round 2. As of right now, the Raptors are in that 4 spot, and they're only a game behind the Wizards. Whichever one of these three teams ends up at the 4th seed, then they're done, and they're going to lose in round 2. But I do think I still want to talk about all three, because it's so close for that 4th spot that, I don't know which one of them is going to end up getting it. And I think the first thing I'll talk about is the Raptors, and Kyle Lowry's injury sucks. It came at the worst time because he's going to be out like 4 to 5 weeks, I guess, which is going to be pushing up right up against the first round of the playoffs. And if you've heard me talk about Kyle Lowry on this channel, you know that I think very highly of the guy for his outside shooting, his defense, his playmaking, his ability to play with the second unit. And if he's not there for the Raptors, I just think they're definitely worse than the Wizards as well as the Celtics, and they wouldn't really have a chance against either one of them in the second round. So that one's going to be the interesting thing, is just how ready is he going to be for the postseason. If he's ready to go, and he is 100% Kyle Lowry, then they'll be fine. But if he's not, and they have maybe Corey Joseph starting at the point, I like him as a bench player, but he's definitely not a guy who's going to make as much of an impact as Lowry does. And it also sucks because it feels like Lowry hasn't been able to really build up that chemistry with Serge Ibaka, who they got at the trade deadline. I loved the Ibaka signing, or the trade, because he gives him shooting, and he's also a veteran who knows what he's doing defensively. So you're going to be asking Lowry to play with Ibaka with maybe a couple of games left in the regular season and then going right into the playoffs. That's kind of tough, and it's not ideal, but injuries suck, that's all we can say. For the Wizards, I think what's intriguing is their starting lineup has carried them all season. Kelly Oubre emerged about maybe a month ago as a real bench player for them. They traded for Bohan. He's been knocking down his outside shots, which is huge. And then they also acquired Brandon Jennings, and I don't think Jennings can ever be a starter given his inefficiencies and not being much of a defensive player. But as a second unit guy who can play 20 minutes a game or so and be an offensive option, I think he can be really good off the bench. So the Wizards went from having really just a starting lineup that was doing well to now 8 guys who can really play. That's interesting. Now you have, you can run actual rotations, you could do some staggering where you have some starters with Brandon Jennings, for example. I think a Brandon Jennings Otto Porter with the second unit could be interesting. I'm just throwing ideas out there. It opens up a lot of options for this Wizards team that has gotten better as the season has gone along. And Ian Mahinmi is going to be the one more intriguing one, because if he can get all the way healthy and be the quality backup big man that they signed him to be, especially on the defensive side of the floor, now you're going 9 guys deep on a starting lineup that's been playing really well for a while. That Wizards team is scary, man. And then finally we can talk about the Celtics, who have been dealing with injuries all season. They've been very good when their team is completely healthy, but recently Al Horford's missed a couple of games. Bradley is still coming back from his Achilles that lasted way longer than I think anybody thought it would. A perfectly healthy Celtics team, I think, is a damn good one. I do still have fears with Amir Johnson at the 4 spot, just because he has dropped off a little bit this season. You combine that with how ineffective Isaiah Thomas is on defense, and I think this team is vulnerable, especially when it comes to being attacked inside. Al Horford's a good defensive player from about 15 feet, but if you ask him to protect the rim, I mean, he's not the best when it comes to that. But I think another thing that should be talked about is Jaylen Brown, who has really played well for them over the last month or so, getting more comfortable as a rookie. He just seems like he belongs on both sides of the floor. He sees opportunities to cut or to attack off the dribble on offense, and then defensively, he was pretty aggressive last night. I remember he stole the ball from Chris Paul at one point on some help defense, and his defense overall has been good. So if he can be a real go-to perimeter role player for them in the playoffs, then that can be awesome. So that's just kind of how I feel about these three teams as the season has gone along. So now let's talk about how they match up with each other. Immediately, what you notice with these three teams is the point guards. Isaiah Thomas, John Wall, and Kyle Lowry. They're the hearts of their teams. If we start with Isaiah Thomas and how he can do against the Wizards and the Raptors, well, John Wall as well as Kyle Lowry are very good defensive point guards. Now, for Lowry, there is that injury scare once again, but I do think those are two of the perimeter guys in the NBA, just given their size and skills defensively, actually could have a chance of slowing down Isaiah a little bit. Now, on the flip side of things, Brad Stevens has done a very good job of using Isaiah off ball this season. He's not just giving him the ball and having him do pick and rolls and that's it. Like, he's having him come off of screens, which immediately becomes a pick and roll, and a lot of time you have to switch, so then he's going up against a guy who's not as good defensively. I mean, Brad Stevens is always a factor. He's the best coach of these three teams, and I do think he's going to find ways to get switches and exploit mismatches and things like that. It will be interesting to see, but I can also say with Isaiah, he's going to have to play defense, and if I'm looking at these two teams, with the Raptors, you might be able to hide him on a guy like DeMarre Carroll, just because Carroll is much bigger than Isaiah, but he's not really an offensive player. He can't create his own shot, he can't post up. So I think you could survive with that, and then once the Raptors go to their second unit and Isaiah's still in the game, maybe a guy like Norman Powell. I mean, Powell has shown some ability to create a shot, but I think you can survive with Isaiah playing defense against the Raptors. Against the Wizards, it's going to be a little tougher because you can't put him on John Wall, you can't put him on Bradley Beal, and you can't put him on Otto Porter, but you have to put him on one of those guys. I would guess Porter would be the one just because, I mean, it's kind of pick your poison. He's the worst offensive player between he, Wall, and Beal, but he's still a damn good offensive player. He's one of the most efficient guys in the league. So I guess you just have Isaiah stick to Otto Porter, but if I'm the Wizards and Scott Brooks, I'm definitely going to try to find ways to have Otto Porter working against Isaiah Thomas, whether it be post-ups or isolations or having him move off of screens. I'm not just going to allow you to hide Isaiah Thomas. I'm going to attack him when I'm on offense. Now, if we look at John Wall and how these two teams will deal with him, I think Lowry, again, being a very good defensive player, could offset John a bit. I think the only other option for the Raptors would be to put DeMarre Carroll on him, and Carroll has not been the best defensive player since they acquired him, probably due to injury more than anything else, but it's still a reality. Norman Powell's a good defensive player. I could see him having some time on John Wall. PJ Tucker is another guy who in instances could be on Wall. So I think the Raptors have guys, but in the starting lineup, I think the one dude I would really rely on would be Kyle Lowry for that. Now, I think it should be said, the Raptors do have a lot of options when it comes to their defense. They can roll with Ibaka at the center position, go with Patterson at the 4. That would probably be their best defensive front court because both of them can move around the floor pretty well. They have options at the small ball 4 with DeMarre Carroll, PJ Tucker. They have a lot of options, I just don't know which one's going to end up being the right one. And then for the Celtics, I mean, they have Crowder, they have Bradley, they have Marcus Smart, they have Jaylen Brown, who I think's been good defensively. I think they have enough perimeter defenders to where hopefully John Wall just doesn't destroy them. And then if we look at Kyle Lowry, once again, Wall, good defensive point guard, and then the Celtics and their perimeter defenders. But I think when I'm talking about John Wall, we have to talk about his ability to penetrate. I don't know if I'm really intimidated by either the Celtics or the Raptors' rim protection. I mean, these guys, they have good defensive big men in Al Horford and Serge Ibaka, but when we're looking at the other guys, when we're looking at the Kelly Olynyk, Jonas Jerebko, Amir Johnson, for the Raptors, it would be Bebe, who is a good shot blocker, but if you ask him to play defense outside of the paint, he's not very good. Jonas Valanciunas isn't scaring anyone. John Wall might be able to just feast on the inside defenses of these teams. I think if these teams, the Raptors and the Celtics, really want a chance at dealing with Wall, they're going to have to stop him from getting to the rim, and I'm pretty sure that's about impossible to do, but they're going to have to figure out a way to do it. But now we can talk about the weaknesses of these teams. For the Celtics, rebounding. You're going to have to deal with Valanciunas, who's a very good offensive rebounder at 3 a game, and you're going to have to deal with Marcin Gortat, who also grabs 3 offensive rebounds a game, and that could be just too much for the Celtics to deal with if they end up getting matched up with either one of these teams. Rebounding sucks, man. You can be a quality offensive team, a quality defensive one. If you getting killed on the boards, anybody can beat you. Now for the Raptors, it's can you just play enough defense? Like, can you defend John Wall, Bradley Beal, and Otto Porter enough to where the Wizards don't just kill you? Can you defend Isaiah Thomas and the Celtics' decent amount of guys who put up like 15 points a game or can just hit an outside shot? Now, I did like the additions of PJ Tucker and Serge Ibaka, but we're just going to have to see. And then for the Wizards, I think it's going to be, can your second unit hold up? Because you traded for Bohan, Oubre emerged. Can he maintain it? I don't know. Can Brandon Jennings be good? I mean, that's the question. That was their big weakness all season, second unit. They got some guys. Hopefully those guys can just perform well. So I think I'm done. I'm trying to talk about 3 NBA teams and not do it for like 30 minutes, so hopefully I got them as much out there as I wanted to.